How often do you hear your prospects say, hey, well, we really love your product, but it's outside of our price range. Can you offer us a discount? As we move into the potential recession that everyone's talking about in the media, it's almost self-fulfilling at this point. You're going to hear this question a lot more often. Now, giving discounts can be a great way to speed up a slow-moving deal. But if you're adjusting price before negotiations even begin, then you're doing yourself a serious disservice. And instead of caving right away, there are 4 tried and true responses that you can give to a prospect when they ask you this question in a real sales conversation, and you can turn this around and put it in your favor. Hi, my name is Will and I make selling simple. Now today we're going to talk about discounting, specifically how you can respond to a discount request without 1, adjusting your price, and 2, pissing off your potential customers. So first we're going to take a look at what's so bad about discounting right off the bat, and there are 3 major reasons that we're going to cover here. And then we're going to get into the 4 word-for-word responses that you can give when someone gives you a discount request. And they are: number 1, the value probe; number 2, the obstacle identifier; number 3 is and you've got to be gutsy to use this one, the why response; and then 4, the tit-for-tat. So if you're giving discounts willy-nilly and not closing deals on the back of them, then this video is going to be a real game changer for you. So let's get right into it. So first of all, let's talk about what's wrong with discounting immediately at the top of the sales process. And like I said earlier, discounting isn't always a bad thing. It can speed up deals and it can give you leverage for reducing the service that you're offering in response to that deal. It gives you lots of different options, but there are 3 very real problems to offering a discount before negotiations have even really taken place. First off, your buyer is going to subconsciously, or even consciously at this point, devalue your service. After all, if you're really going to deliver the ROI that you're pitching, then why do you have to immediately discount the price before you've even got the prospect on board? Second, the instant that you propose a discount from your side to the prospect, you lose some of your negotiation power. You lose this negotiation power because you've taken the price, the biggest variable of the negotiation, and you've put it on the table. You've said, this is just random. These numbers don't mean anything. They don't tally with the return on investment that we deliver. Hey, everything is available for you to essentially shaft me on. And third, discounting shifts the focus. In the buyer's mind, you shifted the conversation from the value that you're delivering, the value that's being exchanged, to the emotional topic of money. Rather than the buyer thinking about the impact that your service is going to have on their business, they're now thinking about, well, how much is this going to cost me, and the opportunities that I'm going to lose from the cash not being in the bank, but then also the second and third order consequences of what happens if another deal comes along, what happens if I need to go down this route, what happens if there's a massive recession, perhaps I should just keep hold of this cash instead. So with those 3 things in mind, it's important that negotiation on price and discounting in general happen towards the end of the sales process rather than the beginning of it. But that being said, if a buyer does request a discount early in the process, there are a few things that you can do to relieve this pressure that's been put on top of you. And that brings us to the 4 word-for-word responses that are going to deflect, turn the tables, and even give you a negotiation and a selling advantage when discounts come up. So response number 1 is what's called the value probe. And the first and the easiest way to deal with a buyer bringing up the idea of a discount is to say this, essentially word for word. You can turn around and say, hey, well, we can have a conversation about the numbers, but let's first make sure that we're on the right page, the same page here about our service being a good fit for your needs. So what does this response do? What are we doing here? First off, you buy yourself time to reframe the conversation. Right now, the buyer is focused on price alone. That's all they care about. Are you within their budget? But at this point in the sales process, you need to demonstrate value. You need to show that you offer something that your competitor doesn't. You need to show that you can actually solve this issue for certain. And most importantly, how does everything that you do, the product, the service, the training, everything that you implement, how does this solve a buyer's problem? And so at the top of the sales cycle, we want to refocus on the value that we're offering rather than how much it's going to cost. It also gives you time to build more value before the numbers do get discussed as well. Because in my experience, a lot of salespeople talk about price before the prospect even understands all the additional benefits that they get from working with you that haven't even been discussed yet. So that's response number 1. And essentially you go, okay, well, we can have a conversation about the numbers, but let's make sure that we're on the same page. That's the easiest and quickest way to deflect anyone complaining about pricing or asking for discounts at the top of the sales process. The second way to deal with your buyers asking for discounts is to answer your buyer's question with a question. And this sounds a bit weird, right? But when your buyer asks you if hey, Will, can we have a discount on Salesman Simple Academy? You can say, well, hey, that's a fair question. So you acknowledge the fact that they've engaged with you. Do you see price being a major obstacle in this conversation? And I use this one all of the time. This immediately makes the buyer reconsider when they ask this question. You respond with your own question. Hey, do I really want a discount here? Or do I just want to get this deal done? Do I want to just get in Salesman Simple Academy and get trained and make more money so that all of these issues, queries, and discounts just disappear? And it also pushes the pressure back on the prospect to justify why there should be a discount in the first place. And a bit of a bonus tip here, notice how I said, hey, that's a fair question at the top of the response here. Well, the point of this step is to acknowledge to the buyer that I heard them. So I'm not just throwing questions back and forth and using rhetoric to confuse the buyer. I'm not doing that at all. I'm saying, hey, I heard that you asked a question, but I can't answer it until you give me this little bit more information. And so this little just tiny tag on at the top of my response just stops it coming across as manipulative, and it lets the buyer feel a little bit more in control. Okay, so that's response number 2. Let's look at response number 3. And this is the why response. And this is if you're feeling brave or if you've got just masses and masses of rapport with the prospect. Because when the buyer asks you about discounts, you can respond politely and assertively, but you're not being aggressive here. You just go, why? And I know that sounds crazy just to answer a question with why. And this does take some guts, but it works because your buyer just won't be expecting it. And if you're doing this over a Zoom especially, or face-to-face, a slight look of confusion on your face helps sell this question as well. You just go, why? The point here is to look sincere, like nobody else has ever asked you for a discount before, rather than aggressively going, hey, why are you pestering me on these numbers? And throwing the prospect back a why response when they ask for a discount stops the prospect negotiating on price just for the sake of negotiating. So if I'm Salesman Simple Academy is one price, no matter how many people you sign up, no matter what kind of terms of deal or however you want to frame it up, it's the same price every single time. So when someone asks for a discount, sometimes I'll just go, why? And they'll go, well, I've got to ask, or, I feel bad if I didn't ask for a discount. I'm sure you give other people discounts. And my response is, no, the price is the price. And if you say it as subtly and as calmly as that, most people will fall into your frame, especially in the B2B space, right? They're not spending their money. They're conscious that they're spending the company's money. And so they want to do a good job. They don't want to look like an idiot by one colleague buys your product or service for X, they spend Y, and they've spent more because they didn't ask the discount question. So it's not an unreasonable question for them to ask you in the first place. But when you turn around and go, why? They start going introverted. They start going, okay, well, if the ROI is this and I'm going to get that, well, this makes sense. So I don't really need a discount. And the final part of this conversation, the buyer typically turns around and goes, oh, well, I was just wondering, it was worth asking the question. You can shrug it off. Then you can just carry on with the sales process. Again, this only really works. It's only really effective when you've got high levels of trust and rapport with the prospect when they ask you this question. But feel free to use it. It's dead simple and it is effective. The final way to deal with a question coming your way, being flung over the internet or your phone line on discounts, is what we call tit-for-tat. And this can be the cleverest approach to do this. It's certainly the most logical approach to respond to this discount question. Because with the right wording, both you and the buyer are going to leave the conversation potentially with an added layer of value. So when someone asks for a discount, you're going to say something along the lines of, hey, well, I can reduce the costs on my side if we, extend the service, the contract, change the tier of the service, you give me a referral, you give me a testimonial, whatever it is. So you're going to reduce the costs on your side if the buyer can increase the value that they're going to give you on their side. So the exchange now gets slanted one way or the other. And this turns a concession where perhaps the buyer just does physically not have the budget to work with you, and so they need the price dropping a little bit, into an active negotiation where you personally or the organization can get something of value from them to offset that change in price. Now, this is not something that you can deploy with every single buyer because, truth be told, you can shut down this discount request with most people coming through your sales process using the previous 3 responses without having to give anything up. But if you're dealing with a tough customer and you need to get the deal done because, hey, it's the end of the quarter and you need that one deal to get you over your commission pipeline hurdle, or maybe this is a really important large account that's going to look great having their logo on your company's homepage, this could be your winning ticket to getting a deal done. And so it's always a good idea to walk into your sales meetings with what we call a BATNA, or a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If the prospect turns around and says, hey, we just can't do X, well, you need to have at the back of your mind, at the very least, if not written and documented, a Y to get the deal done instead. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be better for you to, if X is off the table, to come home with Y instead. And so do you see how all this works? With a little bit of wordsmithing and a little bit of nudging and influence, you can either shut down entirely your prospect's discount request, or you can move them and upsell them even to a higher value sale. It's win-win for everyone. So there's nothing wrong with offering a discount if the timing is right. But if you do it too early in the sales process, one, you're immediately devaluing your service in the prospect's eyes. Number two, you're forfeiting a good chunk of your negotiating power before the negotiations have even really started. And three, you're shifting the prospect's mindset from value to money way too early in the game. So remember, next time you get hit with a discount request, try using number one, the value probe. So reframe the conversation and reiterate the value that you provide to the prospect. Number two, the obstacle identifier to shift your focus back to the prospect and let them feel in control. Or number three, if you're feeling ballsy, ask why and get the buyer to justify a discount to you. And finally, if those strategies don't work, you can lean into what we call tit-for-tat. Can you offer a discount if there's something else in it for you and your business? A bit of give and take here. And remember, there is a time and a place for offering a discount. And with these 4 responses, you can avoid being just strong-armed by bully prospects when they want to talk about pricing, when they want to manipulate you, which is like the inverse of the stereotype of a salesperson, right? And so you can move pricing conversations to when the time is right and when it's going to close a deal. So if you enjoyed this video, why not click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling